with that, I will move on to our next agenda item, where we got like the City of St. Paul All-Star cast here today. So this is, we've got it under updates rather than new items because this is something that has come across in our D10 newsletters over the last couple of weeks. But there is a plan to convert the Orchard Rec Center tennis courts, which are right now combined tennis and pickleball courts, into dedicated pickleball courts through some construction and some park updates over there. When this came out, it was clear that some folks in the neighborhood were very surprised by it, and so we have been talking with the city and asked if we could have some of the folks from the Parks and Rec Landscape Design come tonight to talk to us a little bit about what this plan entails and to answer some questions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brett and Max, and thank you guys for being here.
Yes, thank you, Maggie. Again, my name is Brett Hussong. I'm a lead landscape architect in Parks and Recreation, and I'm here with Max Sell, my colleague. We're the ones who are working on this project to convert the Orchard Park tennis courts to pickleball. And so the purpose of the meeting and why we're here is to clear up a few things on the decision-making process and to really inform the community that this project is coming. We are planning to convert tennis courts to pickleball, go through the decision-making process that led us to Orchard, and then to the next steps. So before I begin, I think we acknowledge that there was some miscommunication where it seems like we were reaching out for more feedback. And I'll go through the reasons why we're here to inform and why Orchard was selected itself. So we appreciate the time that you've provided to us on the agenda, and we've appreciated D10's support in working with us to get information out and into the future. The first thing I want to show, and this is very typical on our projects, when we're kicking off a project, there's a lot of details that go into each of it individual project or activity that we're doing. So we obviously have the community that we are going out to inform, but there's also a lot of other factors in our system, and I will talk about our systems plan that helps drive a lot of our decision making, and this can be seen a lot like the bike plan that Jimmy just presented. There are very specific things that we need to accomplish in our system, and we refer back to this plan in order to help us figure those out, whether it's putting in a playground, tennis courts, putting in our bike paths, also included with public works. So we reference that. We also have the context, site specifically, geography, historic locations. We have a budget. We have other funding sources that we are trying to utilize to incorporate amenities in our system. And then we also have operations and maintenance, and we have other regulatory items such as the watershed. So we're trying to factor in a lot of these 7 items and try to determine what is best for the system itself. So the Orchard Park process, the big thing is we've heard this throughout the community for several years is there has been an increased demand for pickleball, and I don't think that is new. A lot of people have said that. We've heard of a lot of support on this project itself, but we've also heard from the other side. But by and large, we have heard through the city that there is demand for pickleball. And so I was talking about the citywide survey and systems plan, that the survey was associated with the systems plan over the last year. And we based a lot of this off of the survey, and we've heard that a dedicated pickleball court is a priority for a lot of residents. So as we are looking at our system and we're trying to figure out, well, what amenities do we have in our system and how can we accommodate some of the new growing sports? We're reviewing this through a citywide lens. So we're looking at our system, we're looking at what is out there, and we do have over 75 tennis courts that are in our system. We do not have any dedicated pickleball facility out of those 75. So what we're trying to do is trying to find a way quickly where we can incorporate a dedicated facility in our system. So we are looking at Orchard Park. The benefit of the courts at Orchard is that we already have infrastructure in place. And if folks have been out to Orchard recently, that was done in, I think, 2015, but the courts are already showing signs of needing resurfacing probably within the next 5 years. So when I say resurfacing, I'm talking about paint. And so Orchard Park is one of the lower hanging fruit where it has infrastructure. We can convert it while we are redoing the painting. There was discussions that we've heard through email about McMurray. McMurray does not have any of the infrastructure at this time. We are looking at other sites throughout the city, but we have available annual court funding on hand right now. So that funding, aligned with our system's needs of pickleball courts, has led us to select Orchard Park. Other items that went into this decision, Como Park High School is available to the public, so we are looking at other areas that the community can use or to fit the demand of tennis to another location. And so the other thing I would say is Orchard Park would be the first in its system to be converted to pickleball. There's another dedicated site at the Highland Bridge site, which would have 3 pickleball courts. But that is a new investment, and we're looking for the lower hanging fruit to convert the courts from tennis to pickleball. So I do want to point out that these are hard decisions that we need to make through our system. We realize we have an abundance of tennis courts that in some cases are underutilized, and we want to meet the needs of a growing sport and the demand of our system.
Would it be okay? There's a couple of questions in the chat.
Yeah, yep, this is probably a good time.
Okay. Clara is asking, these two who was surveyed, was there outreach done with the local neighborhood? And then about the Como tennis courts, does the school know? How do we access the courts when the school's using them?
Yeah, so the survey was released. It was a year-long process, I believe. So it was anyone throughout the city could respond to it, and had a variety of questions of how do you access the park, what do you typically utilize, what is missing in our park system, and it was overwhelmingly saying pickleball. Granted, it's a growing sport, as one of the new amenities that is needed. Regarding the Como tennis courts, we have contacted Como High School. It is available to the public. There are certain times, I think in the fall, when it is utilized by the high school itself. So there are, I think, some restrictions that would go along with it, but they do have, it sounded like, some student programs.
Yeah, actually, I can as of this moment answer that question, because the Como High School athletic director was just, I had asked her about this and she emailed me, and I as the messenger, I will tell you the AD of the school says they welcome public use, but notes that it will be largely unavailable. So she says Monday through Fridays during the school year from 8:30 to 3, it is not available because they use it for gym and other programs at school. In the spring and fall, it is blocked from 3:30 to 7 p.m. for boys and girls tennis, so both spring and fall. And in the summer, the courts are permitted to the St. Paul Urban Tennis League from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. So I think, I do think that while I understand it is a court nearby, realistically, this is not, Como High does not believe that we can use it during their time.
All right, well.
I should say from their athletic director.
Yep, I think we will have more conversations with them about the use. I think a lot of the kids that are going to be using it would be in urban tennis, would be in those programs, and there's availability before that. But I think there's more ongoing discussion that we'll have with the high school. Yes.
Isn't the pickleball demographic group, maybe similar to my age group in the, 50 to 70 retiree that might be out doing it during the day? So, it's not the kids, I think, that'll be the issue except for the tennis, but will that be accessible to that age group or whatever? And then I was wondering too about what about off of Fairview, what's the park? Fairview and, before Minnehaha, between Minnehaha and
Newell?
yeah, Newell Park over there, right across there is a tennis court also, because I'm a bit concerned about demographics, equity issues, were the lenses looked at from an equity issue, and just seeing some comments that were on the Como neighborhood group. You can play pickleball on a tennis court, but you can't play tennis on a pickleball court. So, you want to talk about any of those?
All right, so I think can I go back to your first question? I think is your question about
Was there
tennis
any,
players?
was there, no, the pickleball
pickleball?
players, was there any questions in the survey about like the type of demographic who answered the survey of who wanted the pickleball courts?
Yeah, I guess I can't tell you the exact demographics. We did ask for demographics during the survey, but I'd have to go back. I don't know if it's specifically what you're describing.
Yep.
And
part of it is my observation too, being and driving around and seeing who's on the courts, what time are they doing it, things like that.
Yeah, I think your assumption is spot on, that's who's using it. People that no longer have the desire to play tennis, or it's the retired community that is using it. But I think it's a growing sport, and I think there are students that are using it in school as well, and that's being taught.
And then second, Newell Park.
So Newell Park, thank you for bringing that up. I think that is one of the parks in the system where we're talking about not a conversion, but to have pickleball at that park. So we currently have a grant that we have applied for to try to have a dedicated court at Newell. It would not convert the existing tennis courts at Newell.
Is there an option to add a court to Orchard so that there's a tennis and a pickleball court?
I think all the real estate at Orchard is taken, and so we are looking at, we have over 75 tennis courts, and we're trying to strategically find areas that we can convert to the growing demand. And I think there's a question up here that I saw, it's not up at the top, but about what did lower hanging fruit, I guess we're looking at this as its infrastructure already. I think, how do we know that it's seldomly used? I think our analysis of this is, it is not one of the sites where we do have lights up like MLK, where those are in high demand. This is not an urban tennis site, and so it doesn't have that type of use like other courts do, and we had discussions with Como High School. So that was part of our reasoning where public use could meet that demand at Como.
What is the budget for Orchard? How much is it going to cost to do it?
So that's a good question. I think typically like a full reconstruction of a tennis court can be anywhere from $150,000. So that's removing the bituminous, removing the standards, replacing the netting, the posts. So it can be anywhere from 150 to 200. I think we would be well under the 100,000, because what we were trying to do is utilize the existing infrastructure, replacing the standards, and getting the standards that can accommodate pickleball, and replacing the nets in that fashion, and other site amenities, any other fencing that would need to um, to separate the balls from going across courts or any other site furnishings.
There's a couple more questions in the chat too. Starting on here.
So talking, the middle one, is that traffic, parking?
And let me read them just because we are recording this. So the first question up here is, what did the city do in terms of thinking about equity when choosing this location? So let's just start with that, because there's another question about, there was a couple questions about kind of equity issues. And I will say, this has been one of the main comments we have heard, is that when you look at, so you've got a map in front of you there of District 10, Sub-District 4, which is where Orchard Park is demographically a little bit different than the rest of Como. And I think we are cognizant of that being an area that has been kind of left out in many ways. It's one of our more diverse areas. It has, slightly lower home values. It's like it can be a more approachable neighborhood, especially for younger families, first-time home buyers. And a lot of what we've heard is that that the demographics that tend to really want pickleball courts tend to be more middle class, retiree, definitely folks who are white for the most part, and that there is an effort to make more space for those people rather than the folks who might be more reflected in that part of the neighborhood.
Yeah, I think when we're looking at our systems plan, we did get responses from the Como neighborhood. And so we see that there's a demand for the sport. And this site really meets all of the needs to get at that demand for pickleball. And we're looking at an available public use court at Como High School, while it may be limited in some cases, as you were saying, but there is availability within bike riding distance. There's North Dale that is available as well. There's West Minnie that's just on the south side. And so that's how we're making our decisions. We do see that there is a demand, and there's 75 tennis courts throughout the city, and there are 0 for dedicated pickleball. So we're really trying to meet the needs of the growing sport, what we're seeing in the surveys, and this court provides the best opportunity to furnish that amenity with the city. Parking, I think there's a question, traffic in the neighborhood, parking. So obviously with everyone that knows the court location, there are parking spots there. There is also on-street parking. As the first dedicated pickleball facility, I think what I'm hearing from I guess on the chat and from others, that they're concerns about the increased use. And we're looking at our systems plan to build out more dedicated facilities throughout the city. So with building out the Highland Bridge site, with Orchard, looking at Newell, we've got other opportunities that we're looking at, could be Webster. There's other places that once they are built out, that demand is going to spread out in those instances.
So question, if it would be 2 pickleball courts there, is that what you'd be looking at?
Yeah, we haven't designed it yet, so we just started the process, but there's 2 tennis courts, but you could fit 3 or 4. So we'd be looking at designing for 3 or 4 pickleball.
Oh, you would, so potentially 4, okay. And how many people would be on a pickleball court? I'm not a pickleball guy, so how many are playing?
Well, you could probably have doubles on.
So it'd be 4.
So you could have 4 people.
There would be potentially 16 people.
If it was built out with 4 courts.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So you'd be looking at 16 cars potentially if it's at full capacity and everyone's playing doubles. To give just context and an idea, because there's not a lot of parking. There's some in there, but I don't know how many spots you can get. Not a lot. There's there's street park, I used to walk, I mean, I walk that way a lot on when I walk around the neighborhood, so I'm familiar with that area. So, I get it, no one likes to lose parking spots, but there's probably a lot of parking just on the Orchard Rec side. I'm assuming there is parking, it's not.
There's only 4 spots according to.
No, I'm talking street parking.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not, because I don't think the Orchard Rec side is no parking. I don't believe it is, so.
We were just there for the event, not that long ago, a month ago or whatever. It seemed really easy to park.
Yeah, I don't get the sense of it that difficult
street.
at all,
Did you have
so.
some?
You know, I hate to like be the voice against it, but that's the sense I get.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. But if there's soccer, as they said, maybe it's jammed up with those folks. But I don't know if pickleball is then the issue. Maybe it's the soccer people that are more taking up most of the spots.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a balance. Like we said, the demand will go down once we start building out the system. There might be times where there is soccer and there will be pickleball players. I mean, it would be no different than soccer or tennis players as well, but I get that some tennis players would probably be riding their bike.
There were comments too about the potential noise of it because of the sound of the paddle and the ball. Is there any
I think that's.
discussion on that? Now, there's a train track that goes right by it, so that really, noise is just a type and repetitive, and I don't know how different the basketball, that was just a comment I saw brought up at some point. And I don't know if there's any studies or information you've looked at regarding that.
Yeah, I've heard that comment too, that concern from the community about the noise. So currently, there are pickleball lines that are on the courts that are existing. And so pickleball is being played out there. I haven't heard of any direct comments about the existing pickleball lines being an issue. So I think maybe there's design methods that's the next step that I want to talk about. What is the feedback that we can get as we're going forward to help understand what are the needs and desires as this pickleball court is going in? Is there an issue with noise? Is there a need for more green space, more seating areas, shade? Like these are the questions of the feedback that we're originally looking for. So this is coming online. What design items, what layout, what can be helpful with some of the concerns?
So there's a question in the chat, just to come back to the equity question, but then also about community outreach. And just so the sort of engagement was like the survey, like these are the needs of the city. So that piece is over.
Right, that community engagement, the survey was completed. We've received the information, like I said, that says pickleball is in high demand. We have a lot of existing tennis courts. We have funding available. We've been dedicating a lot of funding to tennis. We want to dedicate our funding going forward to creating dedicated pickleball facilities.
Okay.
And so Orchard, Newell, other sites across the city are being looked at for this purpose. And
those will happen, or that's like funding pending, like that will happen.
Highland Bridge will happen.
Okay.
Newell is dependent upon funding because those would be new infrastructure where Orchard could be converted at a lower cost. Once we go through the layout, you asked the question about how much will it cost, but it'll be significantly less than building new infrastructure. And this can be a new amenity for the city and from what we've heard through the survey.
And you said there's currently both pickleball and tennis on the courts.
Yes.
The lining for that up at Orchard.
Correct, yes. So the question was, is there currently pickleball and tennis lines? So Orchard is striped for tennis, and then it is also striped for pickleball. And we do have a handful of sites, 10 sites around the city that do have both striping. In some cases, it's 10 and under striping. So that's one scenario, but what we are looking for and what we've heard is the dedicated sites. We also have tried a method at Edgecombe where we do have movable nets for pickleball. So Edgecombe does have 4 sites or 4 courts. What we do at that rec center is put in 4 nets, so those 2 courts can be converted into 4 pickleball courts. So we have tried some of these other methods with doing the double striping, even the movable nets, but that does take staff to move them, to store them. And what we're trying to go for is our first dedicated pickleball site.
So can I ask, oh, sorry, Laura. I'm gonna go back to this again. Is there, so, cause when I listen to what the folks in the neighborhood are saying is yes and tennis and pickleball. It has been striped for both. There are other places where there's maybe more than a single court. I guess I'm wondering why this site in particular is a full, if there's only space for one, why is this not a site that can stay as multiple use site? And some other place where there are multiple courts could handle a dedicated pickleball court? I guess that's my question, because this is what I hear is that I don't dispute at all that people want to play pickleball. It just really appears to me that people also want to play tennis here. And that we have an example of a hyper-local community that feels like pretty left out of this process. And so I'm gonna push a little bit and say, if it has been both, why is this the place that it has to be? Why is this the first dedicated one? If it only accommodates, why do we have to choose, I guess?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I'm gonna go back to our demand that we have throughout our entire system. We don't have any dedicated pickleball sites. We've got 75 tennis court sites. And second, we have an opportunity, Como High School is open, so we can utilize that while there's limited time. There's also, while there is this one court, we can get 3 or 4 pickleball courts on it itself. So it's not just one pickleball site. And to go back to, there's existing infrastructure here already, so we don't have to be spending the $200,000 on this. So it's the demand, the abundance of tennis courts, the locale of other public amenities around, in order to do this.
So we're the best site for a dedicated pickleball court.
This is one of the sites. We're looking at Newell, like I was saying. We're looking at Highland Bridge, that will be another one. There are other sites that could be utilized, but this one is not going to require the funding. This is the one that we can accomplish immediately to have more of our, to have another amenity that is in demand for the city.
Maybe one last question. Is there any surveying being done, like someone sitting at the courts to see who's using it when, and like, is it pickleball or tennis or something like that over a course of a week or 2 weeks, or, random spot checks, or, I don't know if there's staff at Orchard at all, or if anyone could track that, but I was just curious if there's any sort of, grad school students sitting there
Yeah.
surveying.
No, not at this point, there isn't. So we don't have any plans in the future right now to do it, but it's something we could look into.
Relative to the, like, Edgecombe to the other parks, who's ever dealing with it, how much is actually?
Yeah, I don't have those numbers.
In any discussion with Minneapolis or any of the surrounding Roseville, and is anyone else doing it? Is anyone else putting in pickleball courts right around us?
Yeah, like most of the cities are. I think we're behind in terms of the dedicated pickleball facilities. Roseville has one, Minneapolis has one, and that's what we're hearing from the survey. People are coming from St. Paul, going to Minneapolis, going to the other cities to find these facilities.
And are they ones that are existing tennis courts that they're changing over, or are they building new facilities?
I think Roseville was one that was converted.
Okay.
And so we're looking at what we have available for funding. So if I can go back to the beginning here, right here, we're looking at our system needs, we're looking at the funding that we have available, we're looking at the demand. And so we have funding from our annual courts funds to efficiently change or convert from tennis to pickleball, rather than finding land and building a brand new site that'd be more expensive. Sure.
So I do have a motion from the floor, which for those of you who have been around land use for a long time know these used to come all the time, and now they're slightly less frequent, but so one of our neighbors who is online has made a motion, and I asked for some clarifying language here, that the motion is to keep it as a multi-use facility. So this is a good opportunity for me to quick run through our motion language for D10. So we, as a district community council committee, anyone who is a resident of District 10 and attends a committee meeting is a committee member, and all committee members have voting rights. And as somebody, as a community member, anyone can make a motion from the floor. As a practice for land use, I like to see our motions in a positive framing rather than a negative framing. So what do we support, not what do we oppose? Which is why I asked for a little bit of language clarification here. So this, Clara is saying that she would like to move that District 10 Como Community Council supports continued multi-use of this facility. A motion from the floor is a valid motion as long as it has a second. So I will ask, and I think I'm gonna, Clara, I assume she can hear me because she's responding here. I am going to put an abbreviated version of it here. District 10 Como Community Council supports continued combined use of the Orchard Rec courts. And Rich was asking multi-use. That just means continued how they are right now, which is dual striped for both. So that's the motion language. We accept motions from the floor. So the motion made is that District 10 Como Community Council supports the continued combined use of the Orchard Rec courts. So in order for this to be a discussion now, I'll ask if there's a second.
Can I ask a clarifying, should it be the community council or just the land use committee, not the community council?
Because it will go to the full board, anything that comes through land use goes through the full board. So it's nothing from land use gets sent out without going through the full board. So that is how it would start. So District 10 Como Community Council supports continued combined use of the Orchard Rec courts. It's probably good for everybody to know that land use and D10 is advisory, not compulsory. So we can share advice, we can advise, but we cannot, we don't make city policy. Yep. Yes, Rich, I think it's, or, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if we say it's still, I think the motion has to stay simple. So I'll ask if there's a second for that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay. So the motion has been moved and seconded, which means it is open for discussion at this point. For our city folks who are here, this is like how community councils do our business, where we make recommendations to the city. I will say I think that this is reflective of at least some of what we have heard. I think at least from the district council perspective, we've heard a little bit more of people being concerned about single use rather than multi-use. That said, I know that we've got a lot of pickleballers out there too who may love a dedicated court. So with that motion out there, I mean, I will highlight to everyone, again, this is a recommendation, is not a rule. It is a way of communicating what the community council hears and what we want to be able to echo to the city.
Is there opportunity with the city to do more local engagement? Because obviously, like, the news of this change has like, stirred up a lot of interest and engagement. It's clear that people care a lot about the tennis courts. Is there an opportunity to press pause and engage with the neighbors a little bit more before things move forward?
Yeah, the last slide, I guess what I'm looking for feedback is how can we make the conversion the best court that we can. So I'm looking for ideas if we need more seating, if we need screening, do we need to create a noise barrier? What are some of the aspects that people have concerns about that we can develop into the design? So that's what I'm looking for.
But conversion is non-negotiable?
But conversion is happening this year. So that's why I'm here to inform about the project and the process. And so I'm looking for feedback that can help to improve that design.
So what you're saying is essentially that if we came out in support of continued combined use, that's really a moot point. That's sort of it doesn't really matter. It is kind of what I'm hearing because the decision was made. Is that correct?
So the decision has been made that we are basing that off of all of our analysis, our system, right? But what will happen tonight, I guess, with whatever your vote is, I'm taking that back to my manager and my director, right? So they can weigh in and make the decision on how we want to move forward. But from our standpoint, the project is coming and we're here to inform. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So in terms of this, I am not in favor of the motion, and I'm speaking against it right now for a couple reasons. One, regarding the equity question, I'm unclear in my own mind because I don't know, is tennis somehow more supportive of diverse community than pickleball? I don't know that, and so it's sort of hinted at, but I actually don't know if that's really the case or not. The other is, basically I'm going to speak for us old folks. I mean, if we're indeed talking about equity, if there are 0 pickleball courts and there are a lot of old people, it seems like an equitable, you don't want to forget about equity based, you think about equity in a number of ways. See, and you're actually chuckling, but I'm not, because I've run into this all the time as a senior. We hear about equity and it's always in terms of, say, gender or race, and I want to bring up age, because the previous thing, bike paths are great, and I want, but it's not necessarily for older people. It's a lot harder for me to ride a bike now than when I was in college, when I rode a bike all the time. And so, yeah, I support it, but it's not really something for me. And in fact, pushing bikes at the expense of cars sometimes is not supportive of old people, because it's hard for them to, I mean, a lot of times seniors need, I know someone who said she used to ride a bike all the time, but now with hip replacement, knee replacement, she just can't ride a bike. It doesn't work for her, it's an accessibility issue.
Accessibility looks just accessibility and equity.
So I'm making that point that please consider age in terms of your equity considerations. And in this case, I think it's supportive. I mean, if there are no pickleball courts, which I'm also not convinced that it's just for old people, because I hear it's not. And so I don't really know what the demographics are of who wants to use the pickleball courts. You probably have an idea from your input, but you don't recall offhand, and you'd have to look at, I'm not asking you to give it to me, I'm just saying that would be a thing to consider. Is that indeed the case? Does it support, because it could be, I'm saying this and then I'm raising the equity issue, you're gonna say, well, actually it's young people that want it, in which case what I'm saying is, meaningless. And the other point I wanted to raise is, and this is inherent with district councils and with committees, hopefully, the one point I would say is, I would like you to make sure you do good outreach of the total neighborhood, because what you're hearing right now is 5 people, 3 people speaking up. And I don't know that we're representative of that. I know I'm not. I mean, I'm one person and I actually know that place. I've walked by that 50 times in the last 2 years, and I've only seen it used once for tennis, but I walk during the day, in the mornings, in the afternoons, sometimes on weekends, and I don't, so I'm figuring it gets used at times when I'm not walking by them. But I actually, if you were to ask me to say, how frequently is it used? Well, in my experience, like 2% of the time that I've walked by, I've seen it used, so not a lot. But you shouldn't rely on me, and just like I'm saying, you shouldn't necessarily rely on this group. So I would be really uncomfortable for us as District 10 to come out unless we had a better sense of where the larger group really is at. So anyway, that's my various points as to why I'm gonna.
I think it's well put, Dan, and I agree with you 100%. Certainly, pickleball is a thing, and you can get into the argument of like, what should the city be doing and what shouldn't the city be doing, and so what would be the deal if we were talking about a skateboard park? Okay, because there's people that want a skateboard park, right? So how many different things should we do? So you've made a very good point that there's 0 pickleball courts in St. Paul. We shouldn't have 3? We should probably have 3. I think that would be.
I think one point of clarification that Claire is offering is that now it is striped for both. You could play pickleball on that court. So it's the dedicated spot is what we're talking about, not.
And I'm guessing that if you talk to people that were playing either sport, they wouldn't be in favor of doing it that way. I'm guessing, I have no idea. I'm just thinking that pickleballers want a pickleball court, tennis players maybe want a tennis court. And then you have an issue as well as nets as well too, that I think just gets really cumbersome unless someone else is gonna be there doing it, right? However, going back to the beginning of the conversation, which is who's using it? Oh my goodness. I think that should be part of the plan that is being presented to everyone. There's all kinds of really inexpensive game trail cameras or whatever, you know what I mean, that are inexpensive to put up and sense who's using it. And I think that for what we would like to have is that information, to be able to come to the table and go, you know what, in June, the tennis court was used 6 times. I think that would make it all easier for us to understand, hey, let's do something else, because it's not getting used. Instead, we're all in the back of our mind, yeah, Dan walks by, it's not getting used, but maybe it does get used all night,
But
I don't know.
Clara mentioned on the online that they do it every night playing tennis, and there are 2 people on that. So again, it's a balance of what and how it can be used, whether they use it daily, when they use it, when you walk by.
Yeah.
It does bring up, we've had interesting discussion on it, pros and cons. The city appears to be moving forward on it, and so it's just the observation there too on looking at the whole ecosystem of all the places it could be. I agree, it would be nicer to have more survey data of, who answered the survey, is that representative of people closest to wherever these facilities are.
And I disagree that our demographics are so totally different than Minneapolis or anywhere around us. So I think that information would be interesting as well too. That in our surrounding communities, they have found that the use has increased on that piece of property or decreased, whichever way it is.
Yeah. And I mean, we'll find out.
We will.
Right, we'll find out one way or another. I think that I have said this much time, I don't play pickleball or tennis. I am very serious though about community engagement. And I do think that if I'm gonna provide some feedback, it's that like this left a lot of people feeling very left out, who were hyper local to that park. And so while I understand the scope of the city planning and surveying a whole city, I think that this is a good reminder that St. Paul is a city made up of a bunch of tiny communities. And those tiny communities can, you know, they are each their own little personality type, and that I don't feel surprised, I guess, that people felt left out in this process. I will also say, I know Orchard Rec Center is a place that we've kind of tried over and over to say, like, bring some energy to this space, you know, and so there are many, this is maybe one of the ways that that happens too. What I do wanna do at this point, Jenny, do you wanna?
Yeah, I just wanna like strengthen what you said, because I think, the other like district council related hat that I wear is that I'm the executive director of District 11, and the Newell Park question came up a few months ago, and I think you will find a very similar conversation, with, around lack of engagement. And so I just wanna like add my 2 cents in there too, that, I think the city, I think we would like to see more local engagement when big changes are happening to local parks that, neighbors use often.
So we do have a motion on the floor, and I would like to close the loop on that motion. Typically we don't let land use go over, but we've had spirited discussion, so I'm sorry, Jenny, and thank you.
That's okay.
I'm gonna call this to question, so as a reminder, anybody who is a resident of District 10 can vote on this. So the language is that the District 10 Como Community Council supports continued combined use of the Orchard Rec courts. All those in favor of that motion, please raise your hand or say aye, or you do a thumbs up online.
Aye.
Yeah. We have one from the chat. Thumbs up. Or anything from the chat. All those, any other ayes? Oh, there's 2. Okay. Any opposed? Please raise your hand. Okay. Any abstentions? I will abstain as chair.
I'm gonna, yes.
Okay. Okay. In that case, we had 2 for the motion and 3 against the motion, so the motion does not carry. In that case, we also had more abstentions than we had either pro or con votes, so that would be reflected in the notes. I think that this is I suspect that we probably have more conversations to hear about kind of community engagement and what plans are happening in a neighborhood, but I thank everybody for the discussion on this tonight, and our guests from the city for joining us and answering some of these questions. We will have on the website a link to the Athletic Courts project page that provides information about this court development. And with that, I will ask if there are any parting words before we close out land use and take a quick moment to move on to the board meeting.
Some sort of on-site thing, or maybe you've done it, on-site, it's too bad we already did our District 10 deal at Orchard Rec, because having people doing something on-site to try to get the neighbors, that makes it accessible to people to come would be really helpful. You know, and you could talk about it and try to get input in that. Some sort of even pop-up thing at the rec center and let the locals come and talk to you.
Orchard is unique because it is kind of insulated.
It is, it's not, you don't just see it.
Yeah,
In between the railroad tracks.
Right.
Yeah, it's
So
packed
that's
in there.
absolutely reviewed.
All right.
I guess I would just like to say thank you to District 10. This is great feedback. I know these are a lot of difficult decisions, so I'm going to take this stuff back. And I appreciate you having Max and I.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brad and Max, we appreciate it. With that, I'm going to call the land use meeting to a close. We will